You know, Black Clover really doesn't get the love it deserves. Or at least, it didn't always start off like that. People really hated this show, and you're perfectly allowed to hate or love whatever you please. But people really wanted this show to fail. But through everything, it succeeded, and it blew a lot of people's expectations out of the water. Now, the first commentary I ever did, which will always feel special to me, was my review of the Devil Banishers arc, and it was not great. It was my first time doing one of those videos, and the arc itself just wasn't great. But this time, I'm here to talk about something I enjoyed, because I like to be the positive guy, and I'd like to talk about Black Clover's Royal Knights Selection Exam. Let's get into it. To start things off, Julius, the Wizard King, totally not suspicious, decides that maybe it's time that they have a tournament to basically snuff out any potential betrayals or spies in the kingdom or the Magic Knights. It starts off kind of interesting, especially since we see the characters being proactive. There could be a traitor in the works. Sitting around and doing nothing about it would be counterproductive. So it's nice to see that the characters are actually doing something to stop this. Not only that, but we also see someone named Xerx, the vice captain of the Purple Orcas, and he gets stopped very easily, and then he gets his identity taken. By who? Well, Xerx. Well, that's what he calls himself. You guys know how identity theft works, right? Because that's what he calls himself. No, in all honesty, his name is Zora, and he ends up being a key figure in this arc. I actually ended up thoroughly enjoying him and his interactions. Despite technically being a Magic Knight and being a commoner, he's actually very rude and brash, especially to nobles, which is a nice contrast to Asta, who, despite being a commoner, he still does his best to be nice to nobles, and it makes sense because they end up teaming up and working together. That's right. Everybody's put into a squad, well, everybody who wants to compete anyways, and we get Zora, Asta, and Mimosa working together. Ultimately, I love this because it shows that even though the Black Bulls all are great with working together, it shows they'll have to end up working with other people too. Plus, I also just love Asta and Mimosa's interactions together. Now, before the Asta-Noelle shippers start jumping on me for that, just know, I didn't say what I preferred, I'm just saying what I enjoyed, and I enjoyed this, so back off, please. A handful of the other Black Bulls get put into different teams, like Noelle gets put with Yuno and N, who is oddly hilarious at times. We get Magna and Sol and Kirsch, Mimosa's older brother, who's super vain and stuck up. Yeah, for as nice as Mimosa is and how sweet and caring she can be, it's hilarious to hear some of the stuff she says about her older brother, and frankly, you don't feel sorry for the guy. We even get Finral, Leo, and Hamon together, especially interesting considering Finral's not much of a fighter, but ever since his experiences with the Black Bulls, and more specifically Asta, it's so nice to see that his confidence has grown. Finral never started off as my favorite, but this arc in particular really helped, especially with some of his later moments. I think that's what this arc really nails in particular. We get a lot of interactions between characters who we wouldn't think we'd see interact all that much, and they all make sense. Not to mention, we get a lot of great backstory moments with some of these characters. We see Mimosa when she's younger, and we see just how different she is, considering she's a noble who actually wants to help commoners out and feels bad when she's unable to do anything. We see that Zora used to be just a regular kid, but his dad was part of the Magic Knights. He was killed by somebody in the Purple Orcas simply for being a commoner, so he grew to hate nobles, and you can kind of sympathize with him in that regard. It's especially just all the more cathartic to see him destroying nobles, especially with his ash and trap magic. It's really nice to see. We get to see Real in his painting magic and just how much pain and kind of how much of an outcast he became because of it. Ultimately, it's kind of a story I had to sit through a couple of different times to really understand it, but once you do, it feels all the more satisfactory, especially just with how caring his butler Walter is. Sadly, this is where I got kind of confused. When I hear Walter, I think of a giant Austrian man who chops you in the chest. This was not the same guy, but he's still cool. He makes a great cup of tea. We also get the cast of Mr. Osamatsu in this arc. I didn't really... They serve no purpose or anything, I just didn't know where else to put this in this review. But the main excitement of this arc are the fights. The fights are awesome. In almost every single fight, nobody looks bad. Well, except for some of the nameless characters, and I can't even say they're nameless because they have names. It's just, not a lot of them do a whole lot. But a lot of our favorites do some great stuff. Asta and Mimosa work well together. They work great with Zora, and they provide good character development and some kinder moments for him. Yuno and Noelle work exceptionally well together, kind of understanding each other a little bit better. And also just the effect Asta has had on both of them. As much as they bicker, and I'm not huge on the tsundere bickering with somebody, it's nice to see that Yuno's able to hold his own and kind of trip up Noelle. It's kind of why I like Noelle so much. No matter how tough she acts, she has enough goofy moments where she's likable and not just annoying. She also has an awesome moment where she stands up to and beats her butt-faced brother solid. It's awesome to see, especially with her friendship with her other teammate, N, somebody who has a lot of younger siblings and always advocates for wanting to take care of them, which is especially nice considering just how horrible Noelle's older siblings have been to her. I honestly love this trio of Yuno, N, and Noelle. They all worked really well together, and I'd like to think that maybe we get more of them interacting as the series progresses, but oh well. Also, N's magic is fungus, and it's fungus. I'm not gonna lie, it's entertaining. I'll definitely give it that, but it's just so random, especially with how creepy and kind of polite and quiet that N could be, and his mushrooms basically act like characters from Bobobo. So it's memorable, at least. I'll give it that. We get to see Soul's backstory and just why she's so, I guess for the lack of a better term, anti-men. Because, well, she got saved by Charlotte when she was younger, and ultimately the men in her town were pretty useless, and even after they touted about how great they were and how the women were supposed to stay behind. Ultimately, I still hate this attitude from her, but at least they explain it somewhat. But of course, we need to talk about the big elephant in the room for this whole arc. Seke. Sorry, I had to do the joke like everyone else, but no. We get to talk about Finral and his butt-munch brother, Longris. And no, I'm not taking that statement back. We've met Longris before in previous episodes. He's a vain, stuck-up royal, and he's basically a jerk to everyone, particularly his older brother Finral, which rubs a lot of people, the Blackwolves especially, the wrong way. It's really kind of sickening to see just that everybody in this show kind of has a messed up family. It's kind of tragic. Longris was basically spoon-fed everything and given nothing but compliments, while Finral was nothing but ridiculed by his family. Oddly enough, though, their soon-to-be fiancée, Lady Finesse, and the rest of the town they lived in did nothing but praise Finral because he was such a nice guy, while they did nothing but basically hate on Longris because he's a jerk, and once again, he deserves it. Okay, I'm skipping over some stuff. Of course, I can understand that somebody who has a lot of pressure put on them, like Longris, not being completely accepted can be somewhat frustrating, and his parents definitely had a hand in that. I'm just still allowed to hate the guy, that's all. They especially do a great job of showing how powerful he is, considering he's able to destroy another team's crystal very, very easily, especially compared to a lot of the other teams who had to use strategy and teamwork, and Longris basically did all of this by himself. It's kind of terrifying to see. After some good back and forth between the two, and a pretty awesome new spell by Finral, he and his team are sadly defeated just mere seconds before they were about to get the victory. And Finral is pretty messed up from it. Sure, I wasn't expecting him to win, but he did a lot better than I anticipated. Sadly, that doesn't seem to sit well with Longris, and Longris attempts to kill Finral. And the Black Bulls sit back and just let it happen. I'm kidding. They basically get in his face and threaten to murder him. Yeah, okay guys, full disclosure, when I first saw this scene, I stood up. I was that impacted at just how much the Black Bulls really care about each other. Sure, they'll pick on each other. Sure, they'll make fun of each other. But you don't ever mess with one of them without messing with the rest of them. It's honestly one of the best moments of the whole series. It's not simply, if you mess with our friend again, we'll mess you up. It's, if you mess with our friend again, we will kill you. It's a scary side to them that honestly feels impactful. Sure, most of them aren't nearly as strong as Longris, but they don't care at that point, and that's what makes this scene so amazing. Ultimately, Longris and Asta's team end up facing off, and in a really cool battle, especially one where Zora ends up opening up and really becomes basically a magic knight. He really shows a heroic and awesome moment for him. They ultimately end up tying. That's right, Asta's team does not win. He might be the main character, but his team does not win this tournament. Yuno, Noelle, and En end up facing Ril's team. Ril ultimately has a great battle, specifically against Yuno using his paint magic, but Yuno's team basically ends up winning with Yuno using his ultimate technique at the time. This doesn't feel like too much of an overpowered win for Yuno, considering Ril, despite being a captain, is still very young and inexperienced, so the loss makes sense in some regard. Also, the fight was really cool, and it's like I've said, if something looks cool enough and is cool enough, I'm able to overlook any problems it might have. It's fascinating to see the effect this has on Asta. Asta clearly isn't taking this well. He feels like he let his team down, and he made it so he wasn't able to face off against Yuno, who continues to stay ahead of him. But what I especially love about this is it's symbolic of their rivalry. Yuno's been ahead of Asta for pretty much their whole lives, but that doesn't make Yuno cocky. If anything, Yuno stands up for Asta more than anyone else. It's why I've loved their rivalry for so long and feel like it's one of the most refreshing things about the show. Sadly, Asta doesn't really want to hear any of that. He's still shaken up and hurt by it. But Captain Yami and the rest of the Black Bulls reassure him that everything's going to be okay. Especially with Captain Yami's relationship with Vanjitz, who totally isn't suspicious and, well, we might want to keep some eyes on him. It's just really powerful to see that somebody like Asta, who's very powerful and motivated, ends up getting kind of broken by this, and it's nice to see how everybody really wants to cheer him up out of it. It really just shows that even though Asta's the main character, he still is affected by other people. It's not just a one-man show. Ultimately, it somewhat didn't matter, considering this tournament wasn't necessarily just about winning. It was about proving yourself and how you work alongside with other people, especially since the Eye of the Midnight Sun are waiting, and everybody who's past this will get a chance to fight them. Lastly, Zora ends up joining the Royal Knights to take on the Eye of the Midnight Sun, and it's revealed that he's also been offered a robe by Yami. That's right, we have our newest Black Bull, and probably the last one for a good while. Probably. Maybe. That's why I love this arc. The interactions are great, the character development is awesome, and some of the fights are really cool. Seriously, there are a lot of really creative ideas and strategies that the teams use to work together. It's really cool. Ultimately, if we ever got another Black Clover video game, I'd love to do missions and tournaments like this. Heck, you guys know at this point how much of a sucker I am for created character anime games, and I'd love to take part in something like this. And based on the robe my avatar is wearing, I think you guys can guess which squad I'm joining. But what do you guys think? Did you like this arc? Did you hate it? Do you feel it's overrated, underrated? Let me know in the comments. And are there any other things about Black Clover that you guys would like me to talk about? Like I said, I love this series and I'm happy to talk about it, whether it's something I like, dislike, or am neutral on. Just let me know in the comments below. This is Alex saying, see you next time. Also, will somebody please tell Mimosa what happened at the hot springs? Her poor heart can't take much more of this.